Good morning, afternoon, and evening. Welcome to the Global Brief by OneRead.news. You know, when you scroll through the day's headlines, it can feel like you're just getting hit with this random, chaotic list of events, right? A missile test here, a protest there, some economic news. It often feels totally disconnected. Well, today, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to treat the news like a giant global jigsaw puzzle. We've got 18 major stories from all around the world, and I know, on the surface, they're gonna seem like they have nothing to do with each other, but I promise you, stick with me. By the end of this explainer, you'll see exactly how a secret missile base in North Korea is connected to a brand new gold rush in South America, and how a football riot in Argentina is actually a symptom of the same pressures causing massive protests in Tunisia. It's all one big story. Okay, let's dive in. So, here's our roadmap for putting this puzzle together. First, we'll start at the highest level, looking at the big power moves on the global chessboard. Then we're going to follow the money and see how those moves spark the wallet wars. From there, we'll zoom in and see how all that pressure pushes nations to the brink of chaos. And we'll see how that tests our entire global system of borders, bytes, and beliefs. And then finally, we'll end with a totally different kind of influence, with a shot of soft power. You'll see, it all fits together perfectly. So let's get started.
All right, Section 1, the global chessboard. This is where we start, with the high-stakes strategic moves being made by the world's major powers. Think of these as the opening moves in a massive game of chess. These are the plays that set the tone, define the conflicts, and create the ripple effects that we're going to trace through all the other stories.
Okay, just look at these 4 moves on the board. Each one is a masterclass in strategic thinking. First up, North Korea. They've built a new secret base for their scariest weapons, their ICBMs, the ones that can reach across the world. But here's the genius and terrifying part. They put it right up against the Chinese border. This is an incredibly shrewd move. They're essentially using their only major ally, China, as a massive human shield. The unspoken message to the United States is, hey, go ahead, try to take out our nukes, and you might just accidentally start World War III with Beijing. It's a checkmate move. Now, at the same time, the Western allies are thinking several moves ahead in their own game. They're not just reacting to today's crisis in Ukraine, they are already finalizing security guarantees for a post-war Ukraine. They're planning for what the board looks like after the conflict, trying to secure their position for the long term. Then you've got China and Pakistan, who are laser-focused on their economic game. They're expanding their huge economic corridor, and to do it, they're sitting down and making deals with the Taliban government in Afghanistan. This is pure, cold pragmatism. It's about securing a vital trade route to the sea, and from their perspective, it doesn't matter who's in charge in Kabul, as long as the goods keep flowing. And finally, you see the US making a move in its own backyard, co-hosting a defense meeting in South America. The official topic is transnational crime, but make no mistake, the subtext is all about projecting influence in a region where China is making friends and Venezuela is causing trouble. Every single one of these stories is about positioning for future power and advantage.
That is the perfect question to ask right now. Because these grand strategies, these big chess moves, they don't happen in a vacuum. They're fought with money, with trade deals, with sanctions, and with debt. Every single move on the board has a price tag. And sometimes, the most powerful weapon isn't a missile at all, it's the wallet. And that brings us right to Section 2, the wallet wars. Now we follow the money trail. This is where we see how those high-level geopolitical games we just saw create very real, very powerful economic shockwaves that ripple across the globe, affecting everything from global trade to a country's basic ability to pay its bills. And here is a textbook example of what those wallet wars look like. The US and the EU trade deal. But don't you dare picture a friendly ceremony with a bunch of handshakes. This was a raw power play, a squeeze. The United States basically put a gun to the EU's head, threatening massive tariffs on their goods, and used that threat as a club to force Europe to drop its own tariffs on American industrial goods. Now, the official story is that Europe feels relieved to avoid a full-blown trade war, but the reporting makes it clear that behind the scenes they are deeply resentful about being strong-armed. This isn't just business, it's using pure economic dominance as a weapon to achieve strategic goals. It's a classic tactic, right out of the Wallet Wars playbook. And speaking of costs, just look at these numbers. This is what the air war over Ukraine looked like for just 1 month. Russia launched over 600 aerial targets, drones, missiles, you name it. And, incredibly, Ukraine managed to shoot down almost all of them, 577. Now on paper, that's a massive military victory, right? And it is, but it's also an absolute economic bloodbath. Every single one of those Russian missiles cost a fortune to build and launch.
But here's the brutal math. The advanced interceptors Ukraine uses, often American-made Patriot missiles that cost millions of dollars apiece, can sometimes cost more than the thing they're shooting down. It's a costly chess match in the sky. This isn't just a war of attrition for soldiers on the ground anymore. It's a war of attrition for the national treasuries. It becomes a brutal question of who runs out of money and high-tech hardware first.
So, when the big economic superpowers are fighting their wallet wars, what do the other countries on the board do? Well, this slide shows two incredibly clever survival strategies. On the one hand, you have Mexico, which is absolutely swimming in cash, pulling in a record-breaking $34 billion in foreign investment. Now, why is that? It's simple. They are directly benefiting from the US-China trade war. As American companies get nervous about having their factories in China, they're moving them closer to home. It's a trend called nearshoring, and Mexico is the #1 winner. They're literally profiting from the friction between the giants. Then you have Kenya, which is playing a totally different but equally smart game. Kenya owes a ton of money to China for all these big infrastructure projects, and that debt is priced in US dollars. So, to protect themselves from swings in the dollar and from American economic policy, Kenya is trying to convert that debt into China's currency, the yuan. It's a brilliant hedge. So you see, one country is seizing a new opportunity, while the other is cleverly protecting itself from risk. Both are finding ways to navigate this new economic battlefield.
And this is the part of the puzzle where things get really, really personal. We've seen the big moves on the chessboard. We've followed the money. But what happens when all of that pressure, the strategic tension from the superpowers, the economic pain from the wallet wars, what happens when it starts to create deep cracks inside a country's own borders? What does that look and feel like for the people who are actually living there?
Which brings us to Section 3, Nations on the Brink. This is where the global hits home. We're zooming our lens right in on the internal conflicts, the riots, the protests, all the things that erupt when those huge external pressures we've been talking about just become too much for a society to handle. I mean, just read that quote. Let it sink in for a second. Sports/crime. When was the last time you saw that as a news category? It shouldn't exist. It comes from a report about a football match, a soccer match, between teams from Argentina and Chile that completely devolved into a full-on battle. We're talking fans throwing stones, police firing stun grenades, and the source makes a brilliant point. When your society is so stressed that news agencies have to literally invent a new hybrid category like sports/crime to describe what's happening, that is a giant flashing red light. It's not just a riot. It's a symptom of much deeper underlying social tensions. It's a sign that the state is struggling to provide even basic security. It's the pressure valve on the society blowing wide open.
And if you want to see a state that isn't just failing, but is actively crushing its own people, look no further than the Myanmar's junta's, let's call it a playbook, for how to stage a completely fake election. It is so cynical, it's almost darkly comical. Step 1, you just dissolve the main opposition party. Poof, they can't run. Problem solved. Step 2, you call a surprise snap election to catch any potential opposition completely off guard. And step 3, just in case anyone missed the memo, you enact new laws that make any form of public protest or dissent punishable by death. Now, the is calling it a fraud, of course, but this has nothing to do with democracy. It's a cynical diplomatic performance. The junta is trying to put on a suit and tie, look legitimate, and hopefully get foreign aid and recognition flowing again, all while a brutal civil war is tearing their country apart.
And you see this kind of instability flaring up all over the world, just in different forms. In Colombia, it's a direct challenge to the state's monopoly on violence. The Gulf Clan cartel, they're not just drug traffickers anymore. They're using car bombs, they're attacking police helicopters. They're essentially waging their own small-scale war against the government. They're sending a crystal clear message. Your peace plans are a joke. We are the ones in control here. Then you shift over to Tunisia, and you see a completely different kind of battle, but it's just as critical. It's a battle for the soul of the nation. Thousands of people, led by a powerful union, are in the streets protesting their own president, who is systematically dismantling the democratic freedoms they fought so hard for during the Arab Spring. So you see, one is a fight against a criminal army, the other is a fight against their own elected government, but both are clear signs of nations at a breaking point.
So let's take a step back. We've seen conflict between nations on the chessboard, and we've seen conflict within nations in the streets. But what about the underlying infrastructure of our modern world? I'm talking about the rules, the technology, the shared agreements that are supposed to hold everything together. How are those fundamental systems holding up under all of this incredible, intense pressure?
And that leads us to Section 4, Borders, Bytes, and Beliefs. So now we're zooming back out one more time to basically run a stress test on the entire global operating system itself. We're going to look at the rules for how people move across borders, the stability of our digital world, and the very ideas of international law and a free press. This slide shows a really fascinating and, you could argue, a pretty disturbing global trend in how wealthy nations are starting to handle immigration. It's basically a two-pronged strategy. On one side, you have what's being called outsourcing the problem. The United States is finalizing a deal to basically pay Uganda to accept asylum seekers who are deported from America. It's a way of pushing a difficult issue thousands of miles away off your own soil. But at the exact same time, they're also turning inward and fortifying the gates. The administration is planning this massive, unprecedented review of all 55 million valid visa holders who are already inside the country. So you see the two moves together. You push the problem out and you lock down from within. Both of these policies point to a global system where the old ideas about freedom of movement are being seriously challenged and dramatically curtailed.
And it's not just the system for moving people that's feeling the strain. Look at our digital world. Pakistan was just hit by a massive internet outage that basically crippled the entire country. And the source makes a great point. This isn't just a tech support issue. It's a massive national security vulnerability. It shows just how fragile our hyper-connected world really is. And then, at the same time, you have a major test of our legal and our moral systems. A coalition of 27 nations, and this includes some of America's closest allies, is formally demanding that Israel grant journalists independent access to Gaza. They are challenging a sovereign nation's ability to completely control the flow of information during a war. They're making a stand for the global belief in transparency and a free press. One event is digital, the other is legal and moral. But both show that the fundamental systems we all rely on are starting to crack and buckle under the pressure.
Okay, deep breath. After all that heavy talk about conflict and economics and failing systems, let's shift gears completely. For our final section of the puzzle, we are going to look at a totally different kind of power. It's not the hard power of armies and economic threats. It's soft power. We're moving away from tanks and tariffs and into the much more interesting world of culture, capital, and what makes a country cool.
So what the heck is soft power anyway? It's actually a really simple and brilliant idea. Hard power is forcing people to do what you want, with a gun or a sanction. Soft power is making them want what you want. It's the power of attraction. It's when your music is so good, your movies are so captivating, your ideas are so compelling, or your country just seems so cool that other people around the world naturally want to be more like you. It's a completely different and, sometimes a much more effective piece to play on our global chessboard.
And here we have two absolutely perfect examples of soft power in action today. One that's as old as time and one that is as modern as it gets. First, the timeless, ancient lure of treasure. Massive, high-grade gold deposits have just been discovered in Ecuador and Guyana, and this is about to spark a legitimate, modern-day gold rush. That discovery alone is going to bring a tidal wave of investment, global attention, and influence to that region. That's the soft power of having valuable stuff in the ground. And then you have the soft power of pure, unadulterated cool. A new global survey just named Seoul, South Korea, the #1 favorite city for Gen Z and millennial travelers. And that did not happen by accident. That is the direct result, the direct payoff, from decades of strategic government and private investment in K-pop, in K-dramas, in Korean food and fashion. South Korea has intentionally made itself culturally irresistible, and that cultural capital translates directly into billions of dollars in tourism and global influence. It's brilliant. So there you have it. All the pieces clicked into place. We started with a strategic geopolitical move by North Korea on the chessboard. We traced how that kind of tension creates economic fallout in something like a US-EU trade war. We saw how those economic pressures then boil over and create the conditions for a football riot in Argentina and massive protests in Tunisia. And then we saw how all of that stress is testing the very systems of migration and information that are supposed to run our world. And yet, even through all of that, we see these new kinds of power emerge, one being literally dug out of the ground in Guyana, and the other being broadcast to the world from a music studio in Seoul. It's all connected.
And really, that's the final piece of the puzzle, the big thought I want to leave you with today. From a secret missile base to a hit K-pop song, the lines connecting everything are getting shorter and stronger every single day. So the next time you see a headline that feels small or random or just local, I want you to ask yourself, what is the larger global puzzle piece that I am actually looking at right now? Because I promise you, in the world we live in today, a small ripple in one corner of the globe can, and almost certainly will, become a massive wave on the other side of the planet. We sincerely hope that by bringing you just the facts, free from bias and emotional spin, and by showing you how they connect, we've given you a new way to look at the day's events. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. And hey, if you want more explainers just like this one, be sure to follow us on Spotify and YouTube.
We drop new content every single morning at 8 a.m. GMT. Thanks again for listening, and keep smiling and making this world a better place for everyone.